Hello and welcome to an Aussie Read. My name is Katharine and I'm a mum who likes to read. Today I am reading Blinky Bill, a Quaint Little Australian. Chapter 1. The bush was alive with excitement. Mrs. Koala had a brand new baby and the news spread like wildfire. The kookaburras in the highest gum trees heard of it, and laughed and chuckled at the idea. In and out of their burrows the rabbits came scuttling, their big brown eyes opening wide with wonder as they heard the news. Over the grass the message went where Mrs. Kangaroo was quietly hopping towards her home. She fairly leapt in the air with a joy. "I must tell Mr. Kangaroo," she cried, and bounded away in great hops and leaps. Even Mrs. Snake, who was having a nap, awoke, gave a wriggle, and blinked her wicked little eyes. The whole bushland was twittering with the news, for a baby bear was a great event. Mrs. Koala had a baby every 2 years, and as Mrs. Rabbit had very many during that time, you can just imagine how surprised everyone was. In the fork of a gum tree, far above the ground, Mrs. Koala nursed her baby, peeping every now and then at the tiny creature in her pouch. This little baby was the funniest wee creature. He was only about an inch long and covered with soft baby fur, had 2 big ears compared to the size of the rest of him, a tiny black nose, and 2 beady eyes. His mother and father always had a surprised look on their faces, but they never looked more surprised than ever now as they gazed at their baby. He peeped at them and blinked, as much to say, "Aren't you glad I'm here?" Mr. Koala puffed out his cheeks with pride, and his wife hugged her baby tighter than ever. There had been quite a lot of quarrelling and jealousy among the bush folk as to who should be the baby's nurse. Mrs. Kookaburra was the first to offer her services, and she came flying over to the tree where the koalas lived. Knocking on the tree with her strong beak, she asked if she might come in. "Certainly," said Mrs. Bear, "if you don't laugh and wake the baby up." "Do you want a nurse for him?" Mrs. Kookaburra anxiously inquired. "Yes, I do," Mrs. Bear replied. "Will I do?" Mrs. Kookaburra asked. "Oh no," said Mrs. Bear. "Your laugh is so loud, and you chuckle so long, that you'd wake the baby up." Poor Mrs. Kookaburra was very disappointed, and flew off to tell Mrs. Magpie about it. "I'll go over there and see if I can be the nurse," said Mrs. Magpie. "Mrs. Bear is very particular, and I'm sure I will suit." She gave her feathers a fluff, sharpened her beak, and then straight to the koala's home she flew. "Come in," called Mrs. Bear on hearing the peck at the tree. "Good morning, Mrs. Koala. I hear you are wanting a nurse for the baby. I'm sure I could keep the young scamp in order, as I've had a few dozen myself." "Thank you, Mrs. Magpie," said Mrs. Bear very politely, "but I don't like the look of your beak. You could give a very nasty peck with it." "They all want a peck sometimes," said Mrs. Magpie in a very cross tone. At this, the baby bear popped his head right out of his mother's pouch and blinked very hard. "If you are so particular, I'll send along a friend of mine who will suit you very well." In saying this, Mrs. Magpie gave the tree a savage peck and flew off. Imagine Mrs. Koala's surprise when she peeped down at the tree later on and saw Mrs. Snake slowly wriggling her way upwards. Oh, she was frightened. "Go away, Mrs. Snake," she called in a loud voice. "I've come to nurse the baby Mrs. Magpie sent me and Mrs. Snake wriggled higher up the tree, right onto the branch where Mrs. Koala sat. She came and coiled herself round the fork. "I don't want a nurse." And poor frightened Miss Bear tried to push the baby's head back in the pouch, but he would peep out. "He's a nice little fellow, and like his daddy," said Mrs. Snake shyly. "I can take him along on my back for such lovely rides, up and down the trees, and in and out big black holes." Hearing this, Mrs. Bear nearly fell off the tree with fright and began to cry. Now, Mr. Kangaroo had been listening to Mrs. Snake as he sat on a branch just around the corner. Slowly he climbed over to Mrs. Snake and caught her in his claws. Before anyone had the chance to see what was happening, he pushed her off the branch, and she went tumbling to the ground. Two very frightened bears peeped down from the tree, and there they saw Mrs. Snake slowly crawling away in the grass. They were just beginning to recover from this fright when a thump, thump, thump was heard on the ground at the foot of the tree. "Who's there?" called Mrs. Bear in a very frightened voice. "It's just me," came the reply. "Who's me?" growled Mr. Bear. "Angelina Wallaby," called a very soft voice. "Come up, come up," Mrs. Bear replied. "I can't climb. My tail is all wrong," said Angelina. "Well, I'll come down, if Mrs. Snake is nowhere about," said Mrs. Bear, and she slowly started to scramble down the tree. Very carefully she went, always grasping the tree with her strong claws, her back showing all the time, while she cleverly looked over her shoulder now and then to see that all was safe below. It took her quite a time to reach the ground, and she felt very nervous. Angelina Wallaby hopped over to her and gazed in wonderment at the baby. "What a dear little fellow," she said, her great brown eyes rounding with excitement. At the same time, she put out her paws to touch him. "Oh, don't," cried Mrs. Bear. "He is so small, and your nails might hurt him." "I've been all the morning blunting them on a stone so that I could pat him," said Angelina in a disappointed voice. "Oh, I'm sorry," said Mrs. Bear. "I did not mean to be rude, but Mrs. Snake gave me such a fright." "I'll be ever so gentle," said Angelina, "if you let me pat him just this once." "Very well," smiled Mrs. Bear as she opened her pouch. Angelina Wallaby patted him twice, and then sniffed him all over with her soft, muzzly nose. Now her eyelashes caught in his little toes, but Angelina did not mind, and she had had babies herself and knew just what to do. "I wish I could mind him for you sometimes, Mrs. Bear. I'd be ever so gentle with him." "I'm sure you would be the very kindest nurse," replied Mrs. Bear, "but what could you do for him?" "I would come along in the evenings and take him out for a walk. I've got a pouch just like yours, and I'd tuck him in. I'd hop along very gently so he wouldn't feel the bumps." "I think that is a good idea," said Mrs. Bear. So it was arranged that Mrs. Bear should climb down the tree every evening and meet Angelina Wallaby, who would take the baby for a walk in the bush. Imagine how proud Angelina felt. She hopped home very quickly that evening to tell her friends the news. Next day, just as the sun was setting, She came to the foot of the gum tree and thumped 3 times at the ground with her tail. Mrs. Bear peeped around the corner of her home, and seeing Angelina at the foot of the tree, called out, "I'm coming down with the baby, so watch for Mrs. Snake." Then she carefully and slowly climbed to the bottom of the tree. "Is the coast clear?" she anxiously asked. "Yes, Mrs. Bear. I passed Mrs. Snake on the road a mile away." "Well, do be careful, Angelina, and bring him back before the day breaks. Is your pouch warm?" And Mrs. Bear inspected Angelina's pouch. "Yes, Mrs. Bear, it may be a trifle large, so I padded it well with grass, but it is very warm and not a bit draughty." So the baby was carefully taken from his mother's pouch and gently placed in Angelina's. Waving a paw to Mrs. Bear, she took a hop and then peeped down at the baby to see what he thought of it. Taking several more hops, she soon started away for the bush track and in no time came to Mrs. Rabbit's home. Thumping her tail on the ground, she waited a moment. Mrs. Rabbit popped her head out of the burrow. "Good evening, Mrs. Rab. I've brought the baby to show you." "Good gracious, how lovely," said Mrs. Rabbit, as Angelina gently drew the baby bear from her pouch. Several more bunnies came round to inspect the new arrival. "Just look at his ears," cried Mrs. Rabbit. "I'm sure I'd never hear with those funny things. And oh dear, no tail. Well, well, take care he does not catch cold. I really think he should have a tail to keep him warm. I have a spare one hanging on the wall of the burrow. Poor Mr. Rabbit was shot, and I found his skin nearby, but I managed to bite off the tail and bring it home." Here, poor Mrs. Rabbit burst into tears. "Never mind, my dear," said Angelina soothingly. "If it will please you, we will tie it on the baby." Mrs. Rabbit dried her eyes with her paw and went sniffling down into the burrow. "I won't be a moment," she called, from somewhere down under the ground. Up she came in a very short time, carrying the tail in her 2 front paws. "What can we sew it on with?" inquired Angelina. "We'll tie it on with a piece of grass." And Mrs. Rabbit hopped around until she found a nice long piece. "Here's just the thing," she cried, came hopping back with it in her teeth. Angelina excitedly pulled the baby out of her pouch, and together they fastened the tail on. It did look funny, as it was almost as long as the baby, but it certainly would keep him warm. Bidding her friend good night, she hopped on her way. Angelina excitedly pulled the baby out of her pouch, and together they fastened the tail on. It did look funny, as it was almost as long as the baby, but it certainly would keep him warm. Bidding her friend good night, she hopped on her way. The moon was now shining brightly, and all the bush was hushed, except for the sound of those little animals who were always busy at night time. Angelina sniffed the night air with delight and felt very happy as she thought of the baby in her pouch. Hopping along, between the grey gum trees, she suddenly startled to see Mrs. Snake lying right across her pathway. "Mrs. Wallaby," called the wicked Mrs. Snake, "so you're the baby's nurse? Well, I want to have a look at him." "Oh, you can't," cried Angelina. "He'll catch cold if I take him out of my pouch." "No, he won't. The night is warm," said Mrs. Snake. "Show me him at once." Angelina thought very quickly, and darting her paws into her pouch, she untied the rabbit's tail and pulled it out. "There you are, Mrs. Snake," she cried. "Isn't he beautiful?" Mrs. Snake did not stop to look. She sprang at the tail and bit it savagely. "Ha ha ha," she laughed. "There will be no baby to take home now." Poor Angelina got such a fright. She did not waste a moment, but hopped away as fast as her legs could carry her. On and on she went, breathless with fear, not daring to look behind. She reached the foot of the gum tree and thumped wildly with her tail. Mrs. Bear came scurrying down the tree and listened to the story. Then, grabbing her baby, she quickly climbed to safety. Angelina waited at the foot of the tree until she saw Mrs. Bear safely home, and hopped away to the bushland. After that, Mrs. Koala decided to keep her baby at home. Every day he grew bigger and stronger until he was 6 months old, and then his mother thought it quite the time he learnt to ride on her back. So with Mr. Bear's help, they taught the baby to cling to the long fur on her back, and only during the cold nights was he allowed to climb into her pouch. He was now growing very big. When 8 months old, he could no longer crawl into the snug pouch at all, so his baby days were over. He became very cunning, too. When his mother was feeding, he learnt to stretch out his arms and pull the tenderest leaves into his mouth. He soon reached the age of 1 year and measured 10 inches, while his weight was about 3 pounds. Strange as it may seem, Mrs. Koala had not thought of a name for her baby. Now she thought it quite time he was christened. So one day she talked the matter over with his father. "Shall we call him Walter or Bluegum?" she inquired. "No," grunted Mr. Koala. "Let's call him Blinky Bill." So Blinky Bill he became from that moment. "Well, my dear, I'll arrange about the christening," said Mrs. Koala. "My cousin, the Reverend Fluffy Ears, will perform the ceremony. And of course, we must choose his godfather and godmother. Jacko Kookaburra will be his godfather," said Mr. Bear. "We will send him a message over the wireless, as he is so well known. And Angelina Wallaby would be sure to jump with joy if we asked her to be godmother." So that night, when all was quiet, Mr. Koala tapped out a message on the gum leaves, calling the Giuseppe bushfolk. "Will Mr. Jacko Kookaburra speak, please? Koala Senior is calling." "Rat-a-tat-tat," came the reply on the leaves. "Jacko here. What can I do for you?" "Will you be Blinky Bill's godfather?" Mr. Koala tapped back. "Only too pleased," came the quick reply. "I'll be along next week. Sorry, I'm broadcasting every night this week." Angelina, who seldom uttered a sound, purred with pleasure when she was asked to be godmother, and hurried home to make a present for the christening. A great day arrived. In a quiet corner of the bush, down by a little stream, surrounded with bells and flannel flowers, everyone came from far and near to see young Bill christened. The Reverend Fluffy Ears looked very important, with a white collar made from the bark of a paper tree. He also held in his paws a book of gum leaves from which he read. Mr. and Mrs. Koala smiled at everyone, and everyone smiled at Blinky Bill. Jacko looked spick and span, and of course, being a widely travelled gentleman, he took things very quietly. At the same time, he gave a dig in the ground with his beak every now and then and swallowed a fat worm. Angelina looked sweet in her nut-brown coat, and her large eyes watched Blinky Bill all the time. She had made a ball of fur for him to play with, and he cuddled and hugged it closely all the time. Mrs. Rabbit rang the bells, and everyone sat down, all perched. The Reverend Fluffy Ears spoke as he took Blinky Bill in his arms. "What shall I name this young bear?" he asked. "Blinky Bill," said Mr. Koala. At once the bush was filled with laughter. Wild kookaburras, who were no relation to Jacko, had flown into a nearby tree, and they made a terrible din, chuckling and laughing at the top of their voices. Nobody could speak for the noise. "Silence!" roared the Reverend Fluffy Ears, but it was useless. They took no notice. "I'll speak to the young larrikins," said Jacko, and he gave the call for all to listen. Immediately the laughter ceased. "I'm Jacko," he said, "and if you birds up in that tree don't keep quiet, I'll tell everyone over the radio what rude kookaburras you are, and that you are no relation to me." Hearing this, the wild kookaburras became very quiet, as they wanted everyone to think they were related to Jacko. He was such a wonderful bird that if they were asked in turn who their cousin or uncle, all would reply, "Jacko." So you see, they had good reason to keep quiet. Blinky Bill had water from the stream sprinkled on his head, much to his surprise, and the ceremony ended without any more interruptions. He was carried home again on his mother's back, feeling very important after all the fuss and petting. That night, up in the fork of the white gum tree, Mrs. Koala told him that he was now a youth, and that if he were a human being, he would be put in knickerbockers.